The old city of Tehran was a paradox, a blend of modernity and ancient history. It hummed with life, but was shadowed by secrets buried beneath its bustling streets. Amidst the neon lights and the constant hum of traffic, the ancient stories still whispered through the cracks of time-worn alleys. One of the most chilling among them was the legend of the Night Hag, a creature of dread that had haunted Iranian lore for centuries. Ada's apartment, Tehran, 2:00 a.m. Ada was a young, ambitious journalist, thriving in the chaos of Tehran. She had moved into her new apartment, a high-rise with a view of the sprawling city, a few months ago. The apartment was modern, yet something about it felt off. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, and the landlord had offered a significant discount, which should have been a red flag. But Ida, always practical, had shrugged it off. That night, she was working late, typing furiously on her laptop. The glow from the screen was the only light in the room. She was researching urban legends for an article, her curiosity piqued by the tales her grandmother used to tell. The Night Hag, in particular, fascinated her. Stories of a malevolent spirit that preyed on the helpless during their sleep. As she read, a chill crept up her spine. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her best friend, Shirin. Shirin, still awake? You should get some sleep. Ida, working on an article. Almost done. This Night Hag story is creepy. Shirin, be careful. My grandma used to say talking about her invites her into your life. Ada smirked, rolling her eyes. Ida, I'm not scared of ghost stories. Sure. Shirin, just be safe. Night. Ada set her phone down and stretched, her muscles protesting after hours of sitting. She decided to call it a night. As she prepared for bed, she felt an inexplicable unease. She tried to shake it off, blaming the eerie stories she had been reading. But as she lay in bed, the unease grew into a palpable dread. She drifted into an uneasy sleep, her mind plagued by images of a shadowy figure. In her dream, she was paralyzed, unable to move or scream as a dark silhouette hovered over her. The figure had no discernible features, just a sense of pure malevolence that seeped into her very soul. She awoke with a start, her heart pounding. The room was cold, unnaturally so. Ada glanced at the clock. 3:33 a.m., the witching hour. She tried to convince herself it was just a nightmare, a product of her overactive imagination. But deep down, she knew something was very wrong. The next day, Ida couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. She decided to dig deeper into the legend of the Night Hag, hoping to find some rational explanation for her nightmare. She headed to the National Library, seeking out ancient texts and folklore records. Among the dusty tomes and yellowed manuscripts, she found references to the Night Hag, or Al-Basti, as it was called in Persian folklore. The Night Hag was said to be a vengeful spirit, often a woman who had suffered great injustice and returned to torment the living. She preyed on those who were vulnerable, paralyzing them in their sleep and draining their life force. As Ida read, an elderly librarian approached her. The woman's eyes were sharp, with a hint of something hidden beneath their depths. "You're researching the Night Hag?" she asked, her voice a raspy whisper. Ada nodded. "Yes, for an article." "Do you know anything about it?" The librarian glanced around, as if making sure no one else was listening. "More than I'd like to," she replied. "The Night Hag is not just a legend. She's real, and she's dangerous." Ada's curiosity was piqued. "Have you seen her?" The librarian hesitated, then nodded. "Many years ago, I was a child. My grandmother was tormented by her. Every night, she would wake up screaming, unable to move. She described a shadowy figure sitting on her chest, suffocating her. My grandmother said the hag was angry, seeking revenge for something done to her in life." Ada felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened to your grandmother?" The librarian's eyes filled with sorrow. "She didn't survive. The hag drained her life away, night after night, until there was nothing left." Ada shuddered. Why do you think the Night Hag targets certain people? The librarian shrugged. No one knows for sure. Some say it's because of unresolved issues or guilt. Others believe it's random. But one thing is certain. Once she sets her sights on you, it's almost impossible to escape. Ada thanked the librarian and left the library, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that her nightmare was more than just a dream. She decided to visit Shirin, hoping her friend could offer some comfort. Shirin's house, 6:00 p.m. Shirin lived in a quaint house on the outskirts of Tehran, a stark contrast to Ida's modern apartment. The two friends sat in the cozy living room, sipping tea. "So, you're really digging into this Night Hag stuff?" Shirin asked, her tone worried. Ada nodded. "I had a nightmare last night. It felt so real. I think it might be connected to the legend." Shirin's face paled. "Ada, you have to be careful. My grandmother used to say the hag feeds on fear. The more you think about her, the stronger she becomes." Ada sighed. "I know it sounds crazy, but I need to understand this. There has to be a logical explanation." Shirin shook her head. "Some things can't be explained by logic. Promise me you'll be careful." "I will," Ada said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. That night, Ada was restless. She had filled her mind with stories and warnings, and her apartment felt more oppressive than ever. She double-checked the locks on her doors and windows, then tried to sleep. But as soon as she closed her eyes, the nightmare returned. This time, it was more vivid. The hag was there, sitting on her chest, her weight crushing. Ida could see her more clearly now. The hag's face was twisted with rage, her eyes burning with a malevolent fire. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The room seemed to close in on her, the air thick and suffocating. Ada woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. She grabbed her phone and called Shirin, her hands shaking. "Ida, Shirin, it's getting worse. I saw her. She was right there, on my chest. Shirin, you need to get out of that apartment. Come stay with me. Ida, I can't just leave. I need to find out what's happening. Shirin, please, Ida, I'm scared for you." Ada promised she would consider it and hung up. She spent the rest of the night researching, her eyes burning from the screen's glare. She found countless stories of people experiencing sleep paralysis and seeing similar figures. The Night Hag, it seemed, was a global phenomenon with different names in different cultures. But the core of the story was always the same, a malevolent entity preying on the helpless. Over the next few days, Ada's condition worsened. The nightmares became more frequent, and she started seeing shadows out of the corner of her eye. She felt like she was being watched, even during the day. Desperate, she decided to visit a local spiritual healer. Healer's house, 10:00 a.m. The healer, an old man with a kind face and wise eyes, listened to Ida's story with a grave expression. "You have angered the Night Hag," he said. "She has attached herself to you." Ida's heart sank. "Is there any way to get rid of her?" The healer nodded. "There are rituals that can be performed, but it will not be easy. The hag is persistent. She feeds on fear and despair. You must stay strong and not let her break you." Ada agreed to the ritual, hoping it would bring her some relief. The healer performed a cleansing ceremony, chanting ancient prayers and burning herbs to ward off evil spirits. Ida felt a momentary sense of peace, but it was short-lived. That night, Ada was determined to confront the hag. She prepared herself mentally, repeating the healer's words in her mind. She lay in bed, waiting for sleep to take her. When it did, the nightmare returned with a vengeance. The hag was more aggressive this time, her face inches from Ada's. Her breath was foul, and her eyes glowed with a sinister light. Ida could feel her life force being drained, the strength leaving her body. In a desperate attempt to fight back, Ada remembered the healer's advice. She focused on her inner strength, refusing to give in to the fear. She forced herself to speak. her voice a strained whisper. "You will not break me," she said. "I am not afraid of you." The hag's eyes widened in fury, and she let out a blood-curdling scream. But Ada held her ground, repeating the words over and over. The hag's grip weakened, and she began to fade. Ada woke up, her body aching and exhausted, but the oppressive presence was gone. She had faced her fear and survived. The experience left Ada shaken but determined. She moved out of her apartment and stayed with Shirin for a while, giving herself time to recover. She continued her research, but with a new perspective. She understood now that some legends were more than just stories. They were warnings, reminders of the things that lurked in the shadows. Ada wrote her article, detailing her experience with the Night Hag. It became one of the most read pieces of her career, sparking conversations about sleep paralysis and the power of fear. She hoped it would help others facing similar nightmares, giving them the strength to confront their own demons. But Ada knew one thing for certain. The Night Hag was real, and she would always be there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for her next victim. As Ida drifted off to sleep in her new home, she couldn't help but feel a lingering unease. The Night Hag was gone, but the shadows still held secrets, and in the quiet moments of the night, when the world was still and the mind was vulnerable, she could almost hear the faint whisper of a promise. "I will return."